What if the words you speak every single day are actually a fossil record?
Yeah, that's a brilliant way to frame it.
Right. I mean, usually when we talk about unearthing the past, we picture, brushing dirt off a physical artifact, like a femur or a shard of pottery to understand how ancient economies evolved.
But today, for our deep dive, we're looking at something completely different. We're looking at the bones of human consciousness itself.
Exactly, the foundational architecture of language. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Our mission today is to explore a profound linguistic map that the sources call the Codex.
Right, and to do that, we are tracing comparative philology.
Hmm.
Now, for anyone unfamiliar with that term, it's basically the study of language development and historical linguistics.
Think of it like a linguistic fossil record, just as a paleontologist looks at bone structures to prove, a bird is related to a dinosaur. Philologists look at the bones of words, the root sounds.
Yes, the phonetic DNA. And that allows us to connect ancient myths from totally different cultures.
And the sources we're using today frame this whole concept around a really fascinating dialogue between two figures. They're called the bearer of the book and the teller.
And to guide us on this journey, it starts in the ancient, muddy Mesopotamian marshes and goes all the way to how we construct modern identity.
So let's start with the foundation of this codex. The sources talk a lot about the triliteral root system.
Right. In ancient Semitic and related languages, words are basically built using a core framework of 3 consonant sounds.
3 sounds that anchor everything.
Exactly. And the bearer of the book points us to a very specific geographical starting point for this. The island of Cyprus, or Cyprus.
Which traces back to the word Cyprus, right?
Yes. Cyprus was an ancient sedge plant. It had this very distinct triangular stem, and it was a massive fundamental building material in the ancient Mediterranean.
Okay, so we have this triangular reed, but the sources are pretty clear that the physical plant is just like the surface layer.
Right. The real weight is in the phonetic sequence of that word, KPR. Yeah. In philology, these specific sounds represent a phonetic constant. You have a velar consonant made in the back of the throat, like K or G.
Okay.
Then a labial consonant made at the front of the mouth with the lips, like P or B. And finally, a liquid consonant, which flows over the tongue, like R.
So you're physically moving breath from the deep internal void of your throat, pushing it to your lips, and then rolling it out.
Exactly. The physical mechanism of saying KPR, or its cousin GBR, inherently represents the universal concept of becoming, or transformation.
Wait, let me pause you right there. So
Yeah.
KPR isn't just the name of a plant or a bug, it's the name of a process. Like how saying the word caterpillar inherently implies the future butterfly.
That is exactly it. The teller in our source dialogue calls it the becoming of the becoming.
Wow. Okay, that makes the connection to other cultures makes so much sense. Like the ancient Egyptians used the root Kheper, right?
Yes, with the scarab rolling its ball of dung. For them, that meant coming into being.
And then in Sumeria, the root gives us giparu, which was a sacred reed mat or a bed, physically woven from those same triangular cypress reeds.
And if you track the GBR variation, you find it in the Hebrew word geber, which means virile strength. That eventually gives us Gabriel.
Oh, wow.
Right. And in Armenian, you have gabar, which is lead, the base metal just waiting to be transmuted into gold.
So when ancient people spoke these sounds, they weren't just slapping a label on a plant. They were invoking the physics of transformation.
Exactly. They understood that before you can have complex civilization, you have to build a container for it, a bed of becoming.
Which brings us to the guy who literally built that architecture out of the reeds.
Gilgamesh.
Gilgamesh, yes. And we have to look at the philology of his name, because normally he's just taught as this tyrannical king looking for immortality.
Right, but the Codex breaks his name down completely differently. GIL comes from roots meaning to swallow, or like a flower or sedge. The Turkish word gül still has this. And GMESH means reed or bamboo, like the Turkish kamush. So Gilgamesh literally translates to the flower reed.
He is the hero of the sedge-bed.
He is. He physically encodes the marsh into his name. And the sources point to the story of Inanna's huluppu tree to show this in action.
Right, so Inanna plants this sacred tree because she wants to cut it down to make a throne and a bed, a giparu.
But she can't do it alone because the tree is infested. There's a serpent in the roots, the Anzu bird in the branches, and Lilith in the trunk. It's pure organic chaos.
So she calls in the flower reed, Gilgamesh comes in, cuts down the tree, clears out all those intruders, and gives the wood to Inanna for her nuptial bed of becoming.
Exactly. Gilgamesh is the organizing force. He takes the wild, swampy energy and builds a stable architecture so that culture can actually take root.
Okay, but here's my question. We're tracking a Sumerian myth from 4,000 years ago and connecting its exact phonetic roots to modern concepts. How do these sounds survive that long without mutating into something unrecognizable?
That is where the Armenian language comes in. The sources call it the tuning fork of the codex.
A linguistic tuning fork.
Yeah, because of the geography of the Caucasus Mountains. High, isolated valleys act like linguistic fortresses.
While everyone on the flatlands is constantly migrating and conquering each other, mixing up their languages.
Right. So the ancient phonetic roots stayed incredibly pure up in the highlands. For example, the Armenian self-name is Hay.
Which means the breath of being.
Exactly. And their ancient king was Ara, who was known for dying and resurrecting.
Establishing this cyclical narrative of renewal, Hay and Ara.
And as people migrated, they took that dyad with them. In Vedic India, it becomes Ari, which is Vishnu, and Hera, which is Shiva.
The preserver and the destroyer. Wow, so the concept survives intact.
It does, and the sources root this cycle in something very physical, the ancient threshing floor.
Right, which wasn't just for wheat, it was an ancient observatory, wasn't it?
Yes, it was the flat space where priests marked the passing of the seasons, specifically the equinoxes. They saw the solar year as this massive cosmic breath.
Breathing in and breathing out.
Exactly, and they assigned sounds to it. The sound M was the descent, the matrix. Autumn, around September 21st.
When the world retreats inward.
Right, and then N represents the ascent, the Newman. Springtime, around March 21st, the upward spiritual energy.
So you put the autumn M and the spring N together, and you get MN, and combined with AR, you get ARMN, Armenian, the people keeping the measure of the Earth's breath.
It's incredible, and this breathing pattern, this MN cycle, is so ingrained in us biologically that it still pops up everywhere.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the sources brought up the Muppets.
Yes.
You're telling me that when the Muppets sing Mana Mana, they are inadvertently tapping into an ancient phonetic cycle of the equinox.
It sounds wild, but yes. Phonetically, that alternating MN sound is the exact ancient measure of descent and ascent.
Breathing in the autumn M and breathing out the spring N. That is unbelievable.
And that repetitive hum in the background of the song. The sources draw a direct line between that and the Armenian duduk.
The apricot wood flute.
Right. It mimics the deep, cyclical breathing of the mountains. Jim Henson's team was just looking for a catchy universal rhythm, and they tapped right into the codex.
Because it's literally our biological hard drive. Okay, so we have this vertical cyclical philosophy up in the mountains, but how does it get down to the flatlands to influence human history?
Through an initiator figure. The sources call him the Ishkan.
Which is physically the Prince Trout of Lake Seven.
But symbolically, if you decode Lake Seven, SEV means black, Van is vertical, and A is sky.
The dark vertical axis connecting the deep waters to the heavens.
Exactly. And the Ishkan is the figure who pulls people up from the black ooze and marks them with the knowledge of the source.
Which completely changes how we view the ancient Sumerians. History books say they called themselves the Blackheads.
Right, and archaeologists just assumed that meant they had dark hair.
But the Codex says, no, it means people of the black source.
Yes, people who have been initiated by the Ishkan. And the ultimate embodiment of this vertical memory migrating to the horizontal flatlands is Abraham, or Abram.
Let's decode his name because this blew my mind. ABRM.
Right. The Aleph is the breath. The BR is the triliteral root of becoming or crossing. And the Mem is the water, the matrix.
So Abram is literally a walking giparu, a mobile bed of becoming.
He is. He's carrying this mountain architecture across the deserts into the flatlands of Egypt.
And on the way, he meets Melchizedek, who is this classic Ishkan archetype. And Melchizedek gives him bread and wine.
And Abram gives him a tenth of everything. Now, usually we're taught this is just an ancient tax.
The origin of the tithe.
Right. But the bearer of the book says this is actually the das I.
The das io. And in Armenian, io means yes, but it's also the numeral 10.
Exactly. It's an act of gnosis. Abram isn't paying a tax. He is acknowledging that the whole is present in the part. He's saying yes to the responsibility of carrying this knowledge.
So we've built the structure. We have the sedge reeds, Gilgamesh clearing the marsh, the patriarchs walking across the desert. But a structure is dark inside.
It is. The heavy, masculine architecture of early civilization provided safety, but it could also become a rigid tomb.
You need a feminine principle to let the light in, which brings us back to Lilith.
Yes. In the Gilgamesh story, Lilith is the maiden living in the tree, and later religions turned her into a demon of the night.
So we've entirely flipped the script on Lilith here. Instead of a monster to be driven out, the Codex says she's the heartwood. She's the mechanism for enlightenment.
Yes. When the tree is cut down, she is released as the iridescent moth of the night.
And the moth chews holes in the dark tent of our minds, the giparu, so the stars can actually shine through.
That is the perfect metaphor. The feminine principle introduces vulnerability into the rigid structure so divine light can bleed through.
It's the opening, and the sources connect this to physical sound, right? The women's evolution.
The LLL sound, yes. It's the breath that animates the rigid consonants. The Armenian word for tongue or language is LSU.
LLL to les you.
Wow. The feminine principle allows the structure to actually speak, and you see this geographically in Mount Ararat.
It's twin peaks, Mesis and Sis.
MA represents the mother, the original source, and SS is the sister, the visible ache or longing.
The nursing breasts of continuity. And they feed the ancient fortress city of Yerevan.
Yes, and Yerevan breaks down to wire, meaning yearning, and van, meaning vertical.
Yearning for the vertical axis. And the fortress itself was built as a downward pointing triangle.
Which is the classic symbol of the grounded feminine principle. An upward triangle is masculine fire striving for the heavens.
But the downward triangle is anchored in the earth, receiving the light that the moth lets into the tent.
Because ethereal knowledge is useless if it just floats away. It has to be grounded.
This journey is just staggering, from the physics of saying KPR to build a container, all the way to grounding the feminine spirit in a downward triangle.
It really is. And the sources leave us with two final related phonetic structures that hold it all together. ARG and AGRA.
ARG. So A is atmosphere or breath, R is fire or energy, and G is the container.
The fundamental structure of reality. It's why Noah's vessel is the ark, and Jason's ship is the Argo.
Structured containers protecting the spark of becoming from the floods of time.
Exactly. And the mirror of that is AGRA. In Armenian, it means a tooth. But conceptually, it's truth.
The solid reality that bites down and holds fast, meaning the words we speak right now are our Argo, our containers.
Yes, the languages we use are currently carrying the ancient architecture of human consciousness.
Which brings up the Hebrew sound map from the sources, stripping it all the way back to base biology.
Right. Before alphabets, there were just physiological reactions. Ha was the exhalation of spirit. Shu was a whisper mimicking the reeds.
And GH was the guttural gurgle of the throat, the primordial ooze.
Those unthinking noises eventually became the structured words we use to define reality today. Language is a constant mechanism of becoming.
The cycle hasn't stopped. We are still on the threshing floor.
We absolutely are.
Which leaves you with a really provocative thought. If ancient random noises evolved into the rigid structures we use today, what if the spontaneous sounds you make right now, like a deep sigh or a laugh or a hum while you work, what if those are the seeds of a future codex? What future language are you unknowingly speaking into existence right now?